5. The legend grows January-May 1942. Sevastopol. Over the next 5 months, Lyudmila continued hunting. Her kill count climbed higher, 225, 250, 275, 300. Each kill was documented. Each one witnessed. Each one adding to her legend, but the constant combat was taking its toll. Lyudmila had been in active combat for nearly a year. She had survived situations that killed other soldiers. She had been wounded twice, once by shrapnel, once by a bullet that grazed her side. She had watched friends die. She had killed so many enemy soldiers that she had stopped thinking of them as human beings. The psychological weight was crushing. Male soldiers who showed signs of combat stress were called shell-shocked and given brief respites. Female soldiers who showed any weakness were called hysterical and threatened with removal from combat. So Lyudmila never showed weakness, never complained, never broke down in front of anyone, but alone, in the dark, she struggled with what she was becoming. And then came June 1942, the month that would change everything. June 1942. Sevastopol was falling. The German siege had lasted 250 days. The city was being destroyed. Soviet forces were evacuating. Lyudmila was in a defensive position when a mortar shell exploded 10 meters away. The blast threw her backward. Shrapnel tore through her side and leg. She woke up in a field hospital, critically wounded. The doctors were blunt. "You're done fighting. These wounds will take months to heal. Maybe you'll never fight again." Lyudmila's final confirmed kill count, 309, including 36 enemy snipers. She was 25 years old. She had fought for 1 year. She had become the most successful female sniper in recorded history. But her war was over. Skiduct, the International Tiragus, 1942, Washington, D.C., United States. Soviet leadership had a different mission for Lyudmila: propaganda. The Soviet Union was desperate for the United States to open a second front against Germany. To pressure the Americans, Stalin sent a delegation of Soviet heroes on a tour of the United States. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was the star. The American press was fascinated by her. Lady Death was a sensation. Newspapers ran headlines: "Girl Sniper Kills 309 Germans." "Beautiful Soviet Sharpshooter Tours America." But American journalists didn't want to talk about her combat record. They wanted to talk about her clothes. "Miss Pavlichenko, don't you think your uniform makes you look fat? Tell us about your beauty routine. Are you planning to settle down and have children after the war?" Lyudmila was furious. She had killed 309 enemy soldiers. She had survived wounds that would have killed most people. She had fought in one of the bloodiest sieges in history, and American reporters wanted to know about her fashion choices. So during a press conference in Chicago, Lyudmila did something that shocked everyone in the room. A male reporter asked, "Miss Pavlichenko, don't you think makeup would make you more attractive?" Lyudmila stared at him, then responded, "I am 25 years old. I have killed 309 fascist invaders. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The room went silent. Acete 8. The Legacy, October 27, 1974. Moscow, Soviet Union. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died at age 58 from a stroke. She was buried with full military honors. Her legacy lived on. She remains the most successful female sniper in recorded history. No woman, and very few men, have ever matched her 309 confirmed kills. But her real impact went beyond the numbers. She proved that women could serve in combat roles just as effectively as men. The Soviet Union had 2,000 female snipers during World War II, directly inspired by Lyudmila's success. She challenged gender stereotypes at every turn. When people said women were too emotional for combat, she demonstrated ice-cold calculation under fire. When they said women lacked the physical strength, she outperformed male soldiers. When they said women couldn't handle the psychological stress, she hunted 36 enemy snipers, the most dangerous prey imaginable. Today, her story is taught in military academies around the world. Modern female soldiers cite her as inspiration. Historians study her tactics, But perhaps her most important legacy is this: she refused to be diminished. When American journalists wanted to talk about her clothes instead of her combat record, she confronted them. When Soviet officials wanted to use her as a pretty face for propaganda, she insisted on speaking about the real cost of war. When male soldiers questioned her abilities, she didn't argue. She simply outperformed them. Lyudmila Pavlichenko earned her place in history not because she was a woman doing a man's job, but because she was a soldier doing a soldier's job exceptionally well. She was Lady Death, and death doesn't care about your gender. Want to hear about the man who fought WWII with a sword and bagpipes? Mad Jack Churchill's insane story coming next. She continued, "Gentlemen, I have come to you to say that we need to open a second front. We need the Allies to invade Europe. Soviet soldiers are dying every day. My friends are dying. And you want to talk about lipstick?" The American press didn't know how to respond. This wasn't the sweet, decorative lady sniper they had expected. This was a hardened combat veteran who had seen more action than any of the male journalists in the room. Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, had attended the press conference. Afterward, she approached Lyudmila. "You handled that well," Eleanor said. "Most men don't know what to do with a woman who has real power." Eleanor and Lyudmila became friends. An unlikely friendship, the American First Lady and the Soviet sniper. But they bonded over their shared experience of being underestimated because of their gender. Eleanor invited Lyudmila to stay at the White House. They had long conversations about war, politics, feminism, and the role of women in society. Lyudmila toured 43 American cities. She spoke to crowds of thousands. She raised money for the Soviet war effort. She became an international celebrity, but all she wanted was to go back to combat. Act 7, The Woman Behind the Legend for 1974, Post-War Life. After the American tour, Soviet command refused to let Lyudmila return to combat. She was too valuable as a symbol, too important for propaganda. She spent the rest of the war training other snipers, teaching young Soviet soldiers the techniques that had kept her alive and made her deadly. When the war ended in 1945, Lyudmila returned to Kiev University. She completed her history degree. She became a historian, researching and writing about the Soviet Navy. She received the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal, the highest honor in the USSR. She was celebrated, honored, famous. But she struggled with civilian life. How? Do you return to normal after killing 309 people? How do you sit in a classroom discussing historical battles when you've lived through battles yourself? How do you relate to people who have never experienced combat? Lyudmila never fully readjusted. She had nightmares. She had trouble forming close relationships. The war had changed her in ways that couldn't be undone. But here's what the history books often miss about Lyudmila Pavlichenko. She became a powerful voice for women's rights and veterans' issues in the Soviet Union. She spoke publicly about the psychological toll of combat, one of the few Soviet veterans to do so. She advocated for better treatment of female veterans, who were often marginalized after the war. She maintained her friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt through letters for decades. In 1957, Eleanor visited the Soviet Union and made a point of visiting Lyudmila. The two women, now in their 50s, reminisced about the war years. Lyudmila told Eleanor, "You know what the hardest part wasn't? It wasn't the killing. It wasn't the fear. It was coming home and having people question whether I really did it. Having men say my numbers were inflated. Having people treat my combat service as a novelty rather than sacrifice." Eleanor understood. Both women had spent their lives fighting for recognition in worlds dominated by men. "You're a girl. You can't be a sniper." That's what the Soviet commanders told her in 1941. 2.5 years later, she had 309 confirmed kills, including 36 enemy snipers. The Nazis called her Lady Death and put a bounty on her head. This is her story, Act 1, The Girl Who Wouldn't Be Denied, June 22, 1941. Kiev, Soviet Union. Nazi Germany had just invaded. Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history, was underway. 3 million German soldiers were pouring across the Soviet border. The Soviet Union needed every able-bodied person to fight. Recruitment offices were flooded with volunteers. Your old Lyudmila Pavlichenko stood in line at the Kiev recruitment office. She was a history student at Kiev University, smart, ambitious, athletic, and about to be told no. When she reached the recruiter's desk, the officer looked up at her and frowned. "Miss, the nursing corps is accepting volunteers down the hall." "I'm not here to be a nurse," Lyudmila said. "I'm here to be a sniper." The recruitment officer actually laughed. "A sniper? That's not possible. Women can't. I can shoot better than most of your men." "Miss, I appreciate your enthusiasm. But, test me." The officer was about to dismiss her when another soldier walked up, a grizzled veteran who had overheard the conversation. "Let her try," he said. "What's the harm? She'll miss the target, realize it's not for her, and we can send her to the nursing corps." They took Lyudmila to the shooting range. What happened next would make that recruiting officer regret every assumption he had ever made about women in combat. They set up targets at 100 meters. "Standard distance for basic qualification. 5 shots," the officer said. "If you hit 3 out of 5, we'll consider other options for you." Lyudmila loaded the rifle. She had been shooting since she was 14 years old, a member of a WWII shooting club where Soviet youth learned marksmanship. She had competed in shooting competitions. She knew exactly what she was doing. First shot, bullseye. Second shot, bullseye. Third shot, bullseye. The officer stopped smiling. Fourth shot, bullseye. Fifth shot, bullseye, perfect score. The officer cleared his throat. "That's impressive, but combat is different. The targets shoot back. It's not a sport. Move the targets to 300 meters, Lyudmila said. They did. She hit 5 out of 5 again. 500 meters. 4 out of 5. The grizzled veteran who had suggested testing her walked over. "What did you say your name was?" "Lyudmila Pavlichenko." "Well, Miss Pavlichenko, welcome to the Red Army. You're now a sniper. Act 2, the 1st Kilogis, 1941, Odessa." Ukraine. Lyudmila was assigned to the 25th Rifle Division defending Odessa against the Romanian and German invasion. She was one of only 2,000 female snipers. In the Red Army, a tiny fraction of the millions of Soviet soldiers. The male soldiers in her unit didn't hide their skepticism. She won't last a week. First time she sees real combat, she'll freeze. Women don't have the stomach for killing. Lyudmila heard all of it, said nothing. Just cleaned her Mosin Nagant rifle and waited for her first mission. Her first assignment came 3 days after arriving in Odessa. The Germans had established a machine gun position that was pinning down a Soviet advance. The position was well fortified, approximately 400 meters from Soviet lines. The unit commander called for volunteers to take out the machine gun nest. "I'll do it," Lyudmila said. The commander hesitated. "Pavlichenko, this isn't target practice. These are real. I know what they are. I'll do it." At dawn, Lyudmila moved into position. She had chosen a spot in a collapsed building with a clear line of sight to the German position. She settled in, controlled her breathing, and waited. Patience. That's what separates good snipers from dead ones. She waited 2 hours before the German machine gunner made a mistake. He stood up to stretch his legs. Just for a moment. Just enough. Lyudmila took the shot. And in that moment, everything she thought she knew about herself changed. The German soldier dropped. Lyudmila saw him fall, saw the other German soldiers panic, saw them scramble for cover. She had just killed a human being. The male soldiers who had doubted her expected her to have a breakdown, to cry, to refuse to continue. Instead, Lyudmila chambered another round and shot the second German who tried to take over the machine gun. When she returned to Soviet lines, the soldiers stared at her. 2 kills, she reported to the commander. The machine gun position is neutralized. That night, alone in her quarters, Lyudmila did cry. But not because she regretted what she had done. She cried because she realized something terrifying about herself. She was good at killing. Better than good, natural, and the war had just begun. Act 3, Becoming Lady. Death September, October 1941. The Siege of Odessa. Over the next 2 months, Lyudmila's kill count rose at an alarming rate, and kills. 25 kills, 50 kills, echoes, each one confirmed, each one documented. The Soviet military was meticulous about recording sniper kills. You needed a witness to confirm the kill for it to count. Officially, Lyudmila was hunting at a pace that shocked even veteran snipers. But here's what made her different from male snipers. She had to work twice as hard to get half the respect. Male snipers who reached 30 kills were celebrated. Lyudmila reached 100 kills, and soldiers still questioned whether she was really doing the killing or if someone was inflating her numbers. So Lyudmila did something unprecedented. She started hunting the hunters. Enemy snipers were the most dangerous targets. They were trained, patient, skilled. They knew all the same tricks you did. Hunting them was a psychological chess match where one mistake meant death. Most snipers avoided counter-sniper operations. Too risky, too difficult. Lyudmila specifically sought them out. Her first counter-sniper kill happened in early October. A German sniper had been terrorizing a section of the Odessa defense line for 3 days. He had killed 7 Soviet soldiers. Commanders couldn't locate his position. Lyudmila volunteered to hunt him. She spent an entire day studying the area, looking for the subtle signs, where the victims had been standing when shot, the angle of the wounds, the timing of the attacks. She narrowed down the German sniper's position to 3 possible locations. Then she did something brilliant. She created a false target. She positioned a helmet on a stick in an exposed location. Then she set up 3 observation positions, each with a line of sight to one of the 3 suspected German locations. She waited. 4 hours. Barely moving, barely breathing. Then the German took the bait. He shot at the helmet. The muzzle flash gave away his position for a split second. Lyudmila was already aiming at that exact spot. She had predicted it perfectly, 1 shot. The German sniper was dead before he could relocate. Word spread quickly. The female Soviet sniper was hunting enemy snipers. And winning. By November 1941, Lyudmila had killed 187 enemy soldiers, including 15 enemy snipers. The Nazis started to take notice. German intelligence identified her as Lyudmila Pavlichenko, female sniper, extremely dangerous. They offered a reward for her capture or death. German soldiers started calling her Lady Death. The name was meant to be derogatory. To mock the idea of a woman being deadly, Lyudmila loved it. She painted a small skull on her rifle stock, started signing her letters home as Lady Death. If they wanted to make her a legend, she would become one.